Steampunky. Today is going to be a slightly different video once again. Something I've wanted to do for a while now is rate something, maybe a video series or some shorts, going over some tips and tricks for anyone using Blender or Unity to make avatars. Now, I know a lot of my community doesn't go as in-depth with avatar creation as I do, and most people in VRChat don't either. So, if it's not your cup of tea, I do hope that at least me talking and rambling can put you to sleep. It reminds me of when I used to watch HGTV with my mom when I was young, and that it's basically a house, it's just a show about real estate. Like, they get people on and they'll go through and visit all these houses, or they'll repair a house, and it's interesting enough to keep you focused on it, but it's boring enough that you can fall asleep at any moment just fine. And that's kind of what I hope this to be. Something that you can listen to and eventually drift off to sleep. But, I'll say this first. I am by no means an expert. I am almost entirely self-taught by trial and error. I've had a few friends help me out here and there, and I greatly appreciate them. But, I've only been doing this for 3 years, and I can very well say things that are wrong. And I expect to. Especially with things I don't fully understand yet. One of those being optimization. With VRChat's default system, it's capped at, 70k triangles is the limit, or triangles that makes up any model. And that 70k value is bogus. It is far harder to reach 70k than any of the other metrics, but the second your avatar reaches 70k, you're marked as very poor. So if you're going to be very poor anyways, for reference, my avatar, with no clothes on, just the hair, the body, face, and ears, is close to 60k. That gives me next to nothing to add for outfits. In order to get to 70k, I have to delete most of my body, and just pretty much, I can't have anything but my top, and I have to delete my legs, etc. So this is a pretty strict optimization rule, when the other ones let you go much further before you reach very poor, and they're far laggier. Now, I had a friend explain it to me recently, and that this 70k limit is meant to apply per mesh, and VRChat lets you get away with having dozens, I'd say about a dozen or two meshes on your avatar while not being very poor, which is a bit crazy. Realistically, the true, hard limit of polygons, or rather triangles, is at 500k. Now, you really shouldn't be going that far either, but once you hit this number, for some reason, from what I know, VRChat starts doubling every draw call your avatar does, which draw calls are, the game telling you your graphics card to generate XYZ. And this, at this point, it tries splitting up your avatar, and I think it doesn't do it properly or something. I'm not too sure. I just know this causes a lot of lag. The same thing happens, I believe, at 1,000 bones, which bones are the, well, quite literally the skeleton of your model. All models have a default skeleton, like, humans do, that are, are vertexes, which are the points that make up every vertice, or that make up every triangle that makes up every model. And these points have a weight value of 0 to 1 assigned to them, and based on that value, the weight value of, the weight value is assigned to them for a bone. And for instance, my bow has a few bones in it, and the pom-poms have a weight value of 1 assigned to the end bone, whereas this top has a weight value of 1 assigned to my hat bone. And yeah, when you get to too many bones, it also does something similar, but again, that's all the things I'm really not sure about. Just rule of thumb, keep your meshes and, keep your polygons and your bones down. I should probably talk about things that people, might actually be able to use. On Unity, the biggest thing for me, and something that I wish was described to me, starting off, I was told that this is way too much for me to understand. It's very complicated, and that's right defaults, which honestly aren't really complicated. They just sound scary. Well, okay, they get finicky when you mix them, but if you have all right defaults all set to on or off, it's pretty simple. You set them on per animation in your controller. What right defaults does is, when it's on, let me give you a hypothetical. So I have a toggle. It's, this is the animation. Sorry about that. I messed up drawing 2 boxes like 5 times, so I decided to cut. Okay. There. These are your 2 states, on and off, right? And with right defaults, if you add, this is the initial state, like this is, where the animation starts at. You get little arrows going to them. So, say I had right defaults off. This is the easiest to understand. Animation A, right here, would turn the object off, such as, there you go, like my hat. So in this state, I have an animation turning that object off. In this state, I'll need an animation turning it on. Like that. Now, I go back and say I didn't have an animation here. This would remain on, or it would remain on, because there's no animation turned off. Hence why we need off and on. Now for right defaults on, we have our on state and our, I'll put D for default. We have our default state and our on state. What right defaults does is, it's what I use for my whole avatar. It's that I turn my hat off. This is it by default, so I turn it on. It's now here. However, this is the glowing orange default state. It's orange in the editor. And in this state, it remembers where it was. So on this state, it's just turning the mesh on. So when I go back, it remembers to turn it off. And so with right defaults, I can turn the hat off without having an animation. So this only uses one animation. And that's kind of the gist of right defaults, which can be pretty useful. Slightly, well, not really complicated, but a good tip for anything from texture editing to Blender work. So when I first started, I would have Unity over here. This is going to be U for Unity. My hand is being weird, thank you. So I have Unity here. I'll have my File Explorer over here. F for that. And then I'll be editing a texture over here in my browser. So this is my texture editor, my File Explorer, and Unity. So if I was editing a texture, what I would do is I would delete the texture from Unity, or rather, no, I'd open it in my browser, delete it in Unity, edit it, export it from here, export the image into a saved location, and then re-import it into Unity. So it would be like that. And it worked, but for any long or big changes, it was kind of a pain. And also, all of my settings on the image reset. I found that, well, this might be obvious to some people, but it wasn't to me. I can just save straight into Unity, and I can overwrite the asset already there, if it's named the same way. So I overwrite the asset, and instead of having to do any of this, I just go straight to Unity. And it makes it way faster. It's how I'm able to be finicky and tweak little textures like the smudge textures on my face, or the, well, these I didn't do. I did this in Blender, but yeah. Speaking of Blender, this trick also applies to Blender. Many people see Blender and Unity as two very different things. And to their credit, they are. But I find it easiest when working in both Blender and Unity to work together at the same time. So, in Blender, you have your hierarchy. You've got the, like, say this is the hips, spine, and then chest. Just the hierarchy. In Unity, it's the exact same way. Hips, spine, chest. That's, okay, it's warped, but you get the idea. And usually, what I'll do sometimes is it'd be a struggle trying to export from Blender and then, like, re-import into Unity, because it'd get all messy. But if I have my entire project as is in Blender. Everything you see here is in one Blender project. I save the project as a .blend file. I don't export it as an FBX. I save it straight into Unity. And Unity is smart, for once, and it can read that .blend file as a .fbx, and I can drag it straight into my scene, and the hierarchy from Blender is 1-to-1 with the hierarchy in Unity. However, they're not, it's interesting because any change done in Blender will be done in Unity. anything done in Unity will not be done in Blender. So you just have to keep that in mind while working, but it makes things like working on Fizzbones, for example, like for my bow, if I notice that, hey, the bones feel a bit awkward, I don't like how they feel, I can just go into Unity, I can go into Blender, and move the bones slightly and save it, and I'll see it in Unity, and the bones will move, but the vertex will stay in the exact same space. It's very convenient, and that was kind of mind-blowing for me. It's helped my workflow a lot. More general Unity tips. Oh, right, we were on textures earlier. This is a bit of a controversial debate. Some people prefer it one way, others prefer it another. But personally, I prefer compression. Basically, on any texture, you can adjust its... My controller won't behave. You can adjust its compression value. Say this is the image. There it goes. This is the image, and you have your little, towards the bottom, it'll say, like, compression, you know? What I do is I set the compressor quality to medium, and I max out the quality, the, like, compression slider, so it's 100%, and I save it. And I do that on any texture with, 1024, 2048, or 4096 quality. Anything less, I don't really need. And you can see I've got 3 4K textures. My slime mask is 4K, my skin is 4K, and my head is 4K. Although my head I can probably lower. Well, maybe I can probably find a way. Everything else is actually, my hat is 2K, but most things in my model are close to 512, like 512 or lower. Like my jacket, 512. Everything you see here, from like here down, is 512 or lower. And that's because of a second trick I use, where I use the same like 5 or 6 textures everywhere. I fake really high detail by using reflections, and reflections, masks, and normal map. I have a sort of like grime or smudge mask I use on my whole model. You can see it very clearly in the gloves, especially on these plates right there, and I tile that for everything. The plaid is the same way. That's the same plaid I use up here, and come on over here, and also here. Wait, I already said that. And yeah, my plaid texture and my normal maps are all very low quality, but they're tiled so you can't notice, and as such it works great. Another thing is MIP streaming. It's by default, VRChat will ask you to use MIP streaming, and I had no clue what that was. Like, what does this mean? Because this little like MIP box, I honestly don't know. I don't really know what that stands for, what it means, but it's basically the way your textures get compressed as things get further away. by default it is set to box, and box kind of blurs the textures over distance, so you become a smudge. But it's recommended that you swap from box to Kaiser. And in the VRChat SDK panel, at the very bottom, there's usually a button saying, hey, you're not using Kaiser. But if you hit this button, autofix, we will set all textures to Kaiser for you. And what Kaiser does is it's a bit more optimized, and as you go away, it just sort of like, it doesn't really blur things. It just kind of, I guess, decreases the amount of pixels you take up. It's more sharp, basically. You preserve detail and don't become a fuzzy mess over distance. Because, well, in VRChat people, first of all, don't really have the most high resolution systems. Not everyone has a Quest Pro. Sorry, not everyone wasted their money on a Quest Pro. Oh, actually, the Beyond I heard is really high quality. I want one of those eventually. Anyways, side tangent. But relatively speaking, I've noticed that Kaiser just looks better. I'm not positive what it does, but it works, so I keep it. I guess I'll give some more another Blender tip, because so Blender is obviously a scary thing for many, because many people just use Unity. However, how do I say this? What makes Blender far easier for me is that in Unity, you control the camera. I'll explain the issue. In Unity, the camera is controlled by holding right click, and you can use WASD, Q and E, move around. If you've ever played Halo Forge, it's very similar controls. You know, you could hold shift to go faster, stuff like that. In Blender, it's nowhere near the same. I couldn't figure out the controls. The controls were a mess, and I hated it. So I installed a plugin called Mouse Look Navigation, I believe is it. Let me, one moment, as I open my File Explorer and look for the download. Shouldn't have been yeah. Mouse Look Navigation. I'll type it. It's got capital M. I'll write the whole thing out. M, L, and N. Those are the capitals, and it shows one word. At least the file is. And apparently, it's supposedly trademarked. Whoa. I hope the video shouldn't lag too much. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'll check that quick. That was a lifesaver. It might need some configuration, but basically middle click does the same thing as right click in Unity. It's a bit finicky in that your speed is based on how zoomed in you are, like with the scroll wheel, and up and down with Q and E are universal, not local. So they're based on world Z, not local Z. But it made learning and working in Blender so much easier. Another thing is the proportional edit tool. It should be like a little three ring circle on the top of your screen that you can click. Will make it so that any vertex you move, you can you move the vertex, or you scale it, rotate it, whatever. You can adjust the size of the proportional edit, and every vertex around it, and a slope you can customize, will receive a percentage of those movements. it is very good for organic sculpting. It is a lifesaver. It's a huge part of how I managed to get this jacket to work, because it's got, I just tried to rotate. You didn't see that. Or like, however long into the video, no one will notice, right? Surely. But you can kind of, just take my word for it. The jacket has an undershirt. It has an undershirt underneath it that it clips with sometimes. Oh, if anyone's wondering how I use this dissolve effect, it's well, the texture I made myself. It's a mask with a gradient, but it's using Biome's dissolve feature. And it actually doesn't use any more animations than just toggling a mesh on and off. With how Unity does animations, so the animation to toggle off, right? By default, the slider for this outfit, the dissolve is at 100%, and the mesh is off. What I do is I create an animation, one frame, that sets the mesh to on and sets the slider down to 0. And if I put a 1 second transition time back to the right defaults too, that 1 second transition will, okay, well, a meshing on is a boolean. So, you know, if its default state is off, then it'll, the only gradient is 0 to 1. There is no, you can't have an object half on. So it goes straight to on. The second it starts, it is on. However, the dissolve isn't completely off until here. Assuming this is on. So it turns the mesh on instantly, but the dissolve isn't off until the second's passed. Now this is where right defaults comes into play. Because there is no animation turning it back off, it's just going back to the default state. So the default state is it at 100, and, well, there's no default state, it's just off by default. It's not being turned off. So it stays on until the very last second, because again, the gradient doesn't exist. It's 0 to 1. So it stays on until it's at 0. Because anything above 0 is on. The reason why right defaults is important for that is if you had an animation turning it off here, right? It would turn off the second you enter the transition. So, yeah. That's how I do all my dissolve effects. And it's a cool, quick little tip to help make your stuff look more polished too. On that note, I also use UV tile discard. This entire model is only 6 meshes, about. Those being my body and head, my hat and bow, my hair, which I could probably merge with my body, my outfits, those are all one, my accessories like collar, collar, socks, underwear, my little key in my back, things like that. Actually, I can show you right here. That little thing right in there. Those little core bounces. I love that. But, yeah, like the key and the core, those are all accessories. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4. The gloves and my boots are 1, that's 5. And the 6th mesh, hat, hair, body, outfit, gloves, and accessory. I mean, that is all 6. I'm a bit silly. But yeah, that's all 6. The reason why they're split up is because my bow uses a fake bloom shader, and my glove also uses it, and there's my accessory. And the issue is that my gloves come off, and I can't turn the gloves off all the way, or well, it'll make more sense when I describe UV towel discard. So, alligator way of toggling things off is in Blender. This, let's see, I have to use the camera to draw because the camera takes priority over the pen for me. So, by default, say this is where your UV is, and the UV is just your vertices or your triangles laid out so you can draw a texture over it. So this is your UV. You can turn on tiling to 4x4 to get a 4x4 grid. This UV, so any of these grids are the exact same as this grid. If I move this over 1, the texture will render the exact same. Because basically all of these grids are compressed into this one spot. So, with that in mind, what I do is, for instance, on my base I guess I'll do this again. On my outfits, right? One moment. Those are very straight lines. So, this is my default. This outfit is my coffee or comfy outfit. It's right here. Now, this outfit has multiple parts. So I put the top here, the pants here, and say I put the the thigh straps. So the straps go here. So they're all in different spots, but they're on the same mesh, right? They're all technically right here in the same spot. And what I do is I have them spaced out properly, and with all this I can go into Unity in Polygon, and in the Dissolve tab, instead of changing the Dissolve Alpha, I can go down to the UV Dissolve, and I can dissolve, grid 0, 0, or 0, 1, or 0, 2, etc. And I can dissolve those grids to get this effect. And that way I have everything on the exact same mesh. And it works great. And I think it's more optimized. Back to the optimization thing, I completely forgot to elaborate. From what I've been told, why are you showing now? I've been working with that slime for a while, and it just refuses to behave. I don't know why. There we go. I'll just turn off for now. Right, but that 70k limit is, I believe, a per mesh limit. If a single mesh gets, it's really like 65k. If a single mesh gets too big, that's what starts causing lag. Obviously, you still want to keep vertex count low, but it's also a good thing to keep your vertex count per mesh low too. Now, I'm kind of taking a small exception. Most of my body, most of my meshes are under 70k. My outfit, I believe, isn't. But I think that's okay, because I use a lot of materials. That's how I get these cool effects. Because, you know, I optimize in one place to be unoptimized in another place. So I can get away with looking really good like this. Yeah. Right. So, I am okay having less meshes if it means I can have less materials, even if they go over 70k. Because, more often than not, it's kind of a loose battle, but for my specific case, because I have really high quality materials, it's better to sacrifice the mesh performance for material performance. Because, well, it's only a little bit, but the leather and brass from this outfit get reused over here. So, you know, do less materials than I'd have otherwise. And then obviously when I get more outfits, it'll be more optimized. Okay. This video was already really long, I didn't really realize. If you're still here and awake or asleep, I appreciate you a lot. I do hope you found this both helpful and relaxing, or just one of the two. If you'd like to see me do more of these, I would absolutely love to. I think it's very fun. And also, I said this in the Discord, but the reason why I've slowed down on uploads again is this model. I have so this is my 8th version. The last version took 2 weeks to get to the state that this one is in after 6. I might be a bit of a perfectionist. But, yeah. I am looking to start working on adding props very soon. I'm finally at that stage where I can. And, yeah. All the love. Yeah. See ya.